Can a family that scapegoats be both dysfunctional and narcissistic at the same time? That's what I'll be talking about in today's episode of Beyond Family Scapegoating Abuse, so stick around. Welcome to my channel. I'm Rebecca Mandeville, licensed psychotherapist, family systems expert, and author of Rejected, Shamed, and Blamed. There was a question that came up repeatedly in the comments of the video that I posted last week. And the topic of that video was scapegoating in narcissistic versus dysfunctional family systems. And the question was, can my family be both dysfunctional and narcissistic at the same time? It's a great question. I addressed it briefly. Might have been easy to miss. And I know there's a lot of complex material I put out in some of my videos when I'm talking about family systems theory, family systems research that's been happening for over 50 years now that many people haven't heard of or known about. So I understood why that question was coming up. I had mentioned that all narcissistic families are dysfunctional, but not all dysfunctional families have a family structure that, at least in the world of family systems, we would consider to be a narcissistic family structure. And there are many commonalities within the narcissistic family structure and the dysfunctional family, which I'll be addressing today. And I will be also addressing how a family indeed can be both dysfunctional, possibly the scapegoating being driven by generations of trauma that hasn't been addressed or even recognized, and a family member or more than one family member who have very high narcissism. Again, as I mentioned, narcissism exists on a spectrum, or you could think of it, if you want, as a continuum from low to high. And given that I've worked with families, sat in rooms with families for over 20 years, I used to run family programs, for example, in addiction treatment centers, alcohol addiction, substance abuse centers. And I would have 20 families in there, along with the kind of the classic identified patient, the person struggling with addiction or alcoholism. I'm in the room with all of these people doing group family therapy and education, and also private family therapy meetings. And then I had a private practice years ago only doing family therapy. So I say that because I'm not sure everyone who talks about family processes related to scapegoating has actually sat in rooms working with families. And I think it's important to get the viewpoints, the experiences, the observations, the clinical research, such as that I have done for many years on what I named family scapegoating abuse, or FSA. I think it's important because if you haven't sat in rooms and worked with families, there's no way experientially you could feel what happens in dysfunctional and narcissistic family systems, how I feel as a clinician when I'm sitting in a room with people, how I'm picking up the dysfunction, what's happening underneath the surface with these families, how I'm picking up a narcissistic family member, because we know most are never going to go in to a therapist's office or a psychiatrist's office to get diagnosed for narcissistic personality disorder. So it's something we kind of feel our way into as family systems clinicians. So that's what I'm hoping to offer in this video and in future videos, along with many other topics. And by the way, I'm going to talk about next weekend disenfranchised grief. I wrote about that in my book, Rejected, Shamed, and Blamed. I want to talk about it in a little more depth next weekend. And Dr. Erin Watson will be publishing an article on my blog about grief related to scapegoating. And thanks for all the great comments on her article last weekend on the fantasy of vindication and validation that many scapegoated people have. I did relay those messages to her. some of my longer term subscribers, I've been here just a few months, but some of you may remember I published a video on the 10 rules of families that scapegoat. That's become a very popular video. It's also become a very popular article on my blog, scapegoatrecovery.com/blog. You can look at articles I've been writing for the past 3 years if you want to know more about FSA and my research. And I wanted to stress again today that these 10 rules that we know, those of us who work in the field of family systems, applies to both dysfunctional and narcissistic families, because again, every narcissistic family system is also dysfunctional. The research that I had mentioned in my 10 rules video by Jose Fernandez Aguado, that he presented originally at the International Cultic Studies Association, ICSA. That research he did established and supported his premise that dysfunctional families in many regards function like cults. This research was not done with narcissistic families. This research that Jose did was on dysfunctional families, and they function like cults. So that is often here in social media, what I see is it's assumed that only the narcissistic family system is functioning like a cult. That's not true. Dysfunctional families, all dysfunctional family types, will often have family roles. The scapegoat will be one of those roles. We call that at times, depending on the dynamics at play in family systems, we call that the identified patient in the family. It may or may not be that they are the identified patient in all cases of someone suffering from being scapegoated in their family, but that can be at play, as my own research on FSA established, with families with intergenerational trauma, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video. Where it also gets a little sticky and tricky is that we also know that in most cases, a narcissistic personality disordered person is created through childhood trauma. That sometimes gets a strong negative action from people who stop by my channel because they feel like I'm being compassionate or empathic toward a narcissist or an evil narcissist. What I'm actually being is true to the facts and true to the research that's gone on in the field of family systems and elsewhere for decades upon decades. And so I'm going to keep sharing this, even though I do know it's hard for some people to hear. It doesn't mean that I'm saying you should sacrifice yourself in the name of compassion or empathy for a traumatized parent who's became a narcissist. I'm just saying how it is. It's often caused by childhood trauma. So that narcissistic parent has constructed a personality unconsciously to defend themselves from the pain of that trauma, from their own toxic shame, from having the self-esteem, as I like to say, the size of a pea, from feeling, I always like to summarize narcissism with, I'm the greatest piece of crap in the world, so to speak, only I use a word that starts with SH, but you get the idea. It's this presentation of grandness and greatness, and unconsciously, these are people with no self-esteem, and their whole personality is a constructive defense. I like to use the analogy of the wizard, if you've seen that movie, The Wizard of Oz, and Toto the dog pulls back the curtain, and this great presence that's been projected onto the screen of the great, scary, all-powerful wizard. Well, when Toto pulls back the curtain, it's this tiny little gray-haired man pulling levers to control everything outside that curtain, to create an illusion of power and control. And he's actually a highly anxious, jittery man. So that's a great analogy for someone with strong narcissism. I also like to point out that sometimes narcissism is created through a child being overvalued in the family. The golden child. Don't forget, again, I'm not saying, oh, you must have compassion for everyone in your family and forget about your own victimization and abuse. That just has never come out of my mouth. But the fact is, a child that is overvalued, idealized, made into a little prince or princess, is also objectified in a different way than the scapegoating, in a way that's not as obviously and horrifically painful as family scapegoating abuse. It's still an objectification. That child has become a projection of the parent's idealized self. The idealized self, the self that is beyond approach, the self that is golden and irrefutably wonderful and perfect, that part unconsciously gets projected out onto the child. That becomes the golden child. So it's projection driven, no different than the scapegoating. What is the narcissistic parent projecting out onto the scapegoated child? The devalued self. And I believe it was Karen Horney that made these terms. She's the one that talked about decades ago, moving away, moving toward, moving against. And I believe it was Karen Horney, Horney, who talked about the real self, the idealized self, and the devalued self. Idealized self projection will be the golden child. Devalued self projection will be the scapegoated child. So it is still projection and objectification. And often the golden child, because of the privileges and perks of being in that position, they're never going to face the kind of overt, obvious pain the scapegoat faces, and they'll never be free from that family system. The scapegoated child, an adult child, has a chance to liberate themselves from this highly traumatizing family system and free themselves from the abuse because they're scapegoated. And whether they end up in a treatment center, such as the ones I used to work in, or some other way they hit a bottom and realize something's not right in my family and how they treat me, they have a chance to, in the matrix, take the red pill, the blue pill, whichever color gets you out of that system, out of that false projected reality, into your true self, into capital R reality, as I like to say. The scapegoated person has a much better chance of experiencing that kind of genuine, true freedom and liberation one day, way more than the golden child. So it looks like the golden child's getting all the goodies in the family, but it's like eating too much candy. It can make you very sick. As I mentioned in last week's video, in a dysfunctional family system, there may be profound intergenerational trauma. So let's look now at families that are both dysfunctional, have intergenerational trauma, and a parent, a power-holding parent, or a family member with strong influence in the family, it can be a grandparent, for example, how they may have narcissism that is also contributing to the scapegoating of a particular family member. Sometimes these roles in dysfunctional and narcissistic families change. The scapegoated child can one day be the golden child and vice versa. I have quite a few clients where that's been the case. So indeed, those of you who wrote me and said, is it possible my family was experiencing the projective identification process, and that contributed to my scapegoating, and I was also scapegoated due to someone in the family, a parent, being narcissistic, having strong narcissistic traits? And my answer is yes, and absolutely, because again, we know, it's why I just spent a bit of time stressing this, we know that those with high narcissism, and especially those with narcissistic personality disorder, have childhood trauma. That's how they became so strongly narcissistic. Now, in rare cases, is someone soulless? Is someone evil? I've seen it. Once you've seen it, sat with it, felt it, you know that that can be true. So I'm not going to argue with people who say they felt that in their family or from a parent. And if that was true for you, my heart goes out to you, because that kind of profound abuse, narcissistic abuse, such as one will experience from a malignant narcissistic parent, or strongly influential family member, or from a sociopathic parent who by nature is going to be narcissistic, a parent who is addicted, deep into addiction. That is almost like a soulless. You can experience a parent feeling soulless. They're in the grips of addiction. They've been hijacked. I like to use the movie Speed. It's like whoever your parent was pushed off the driver's seat, and the addicts come in and is now sitting in that seat driving the bus, and the whole family's in that bus. And it's a scary, scary ride. So I understand when people can react strongly if they just catch a few minutes of my video or don't read the video descriptions, don't know my work, and you have felt that you were abused by someone who was sociopathic, malignant narcissist, evil. I do understand that can be the case. The fact that the parent or the abuser in the family became the way they came due to profound and extreme childhood abuse, that's information people may want. It's information they may not want, but it's information I do have to address, since this is a family systems focused channel, specifically addressing scapegoating. So those of you who feel you were in dysfunctional families that had intergenerational trauma, the family projective identification process was going on, your siblings actually believe these things about you. They're in this, what I liken to a shared psychosis. They're all sharing the same deluded reality that you are a lot of things that you actually are not. They're not seeing you. You're a projection from the system's unconscious defenses, the family system's unconscious defense against anxiety, as I discussed in last week's video, and that's all landing on you. Well, then you top it off with a parent that may have any type of personality disorder, can make someone highly narcissistic. An addicted or alcoholic family member will be highly narcissistic. So yes, indeed, you can be affected by someone with high narcissism and also be affected by a family projective identification process. And when I'm working with a client in my FSA recovery coaching practice, or I'm now offering single session consultations. You can find out about those on the menu in my website, scapegoatrecovery.com. Boy, when I feel that someone came from that kind of a background, I tell them, well, you really got a double whammy. And the trauma such a client may be experiencing lifelong until they realize what's happened to them can be profoundly serious. And I don't mean to minimize someone else's pain if you didn't get the double whammy, but I mean, it's a lot to recover from having that family projective identification process going on, and you're never seen for who you are by anyone in the family, but also suffering from narcissistic abuse that's also driving the scapegoating along with that family projective identification process. So the answer is yes, indeed, a family can be both. Dysfunctional family systems that don't have the classic narcissistic family structure can still have someone in the family with strong narcissistic traits that can create false narratives consciously and intentionally to cast you into a less than role in your family, to devalue you, to otherize you, to objectify you consciously and intentionally. And siblings may go along with that to stay in good with the family power holder. Or again, if that projection process is going on due to intergenerational trauma and what Murray Bowen called the multi-generational transmission process, you're going to be getting it, every which way and Sunday, or whatever the phrase is. If anyone knows, put it in a comment. You're going to be getting it up, down, all around, above, below, scapegoating from all sides. And those are the situations where often I will have to advise the client if they want to experience true recovery and healing. And yes, you really can heal from this. Even in very serious cases, you are probably going to have to end contact, or seriously limit contact. Do the gray rock, most of you I'm sure have heard of, very limited contact, or light and polite. Trying not to read every email sent to you. Have a friend read it to see if it's important. You have to protect yourself from scapegoating, no matter how a family's generating it and no matter what the cause or reason. Families like to maintain the homeostasis. That means the balance that they are used to unconsciously. Family roles help a dysfunctional family feel balance, even if it's horribly unhealthy. So if the scapegoated child or adult child tries to get out of that role, the family's message in all their behaviors being thrown at you will be changed back. We don't like that you're starting to be assertive. You're not fawning and submitting anymore. Change back. We don't like this person who has boundaries. Change back. So they won't say that, it's all unconscious, but they'll have all kinds of behaviors designed to thrust you back into that family scapegoat role so they can feel comfortable. Soul homicide is a real thing. And you are responsible to save yourself, to save your integrity, your dignity, to save your soul. The great psychoanalyst Carl Jung said there's only one person we came on this earth to save, and it's ourselves. And I hope my videos, my book, my articles, and all of the comments in this community we're forming, that you're all starting to share with each other your experiences. I hope that it will help you to save yourself from what to me is one of the most horrific forms of invisible abuse, or any form of abuse that a child or adult child can suffer from. Family scapegoating abuse. Do know healing is possible. I don't hide in my bio at this point in my life. I don't just research, write about this, talk about it. I've lived it. I used to think it wasn't possible to heal fully, but I know today it is. It is. You can disidentify so completely from the scapegoat narrative and detach so completely from the dysfunction of the family. You're liberated. And you have realigned with your true nature, your true self that you came into this world with. And that never went away. It's always there. It may be covered up, as I say, with the tar and feathering, the scapegoat projection and all that energetic transmissions, the feathers sticking to the tar, but you can be washed clean. You can wash that all away. And I see it in my practice every day. And I see it in my own life every day. So don't give up hope. And if you know others who might benefit from this new channel, please let them know. And if you like this video, hit the thumbs up. And if you want to be notified, I put videos out almost every Saturday, but it seems a lot of people don't know that. You have to go and hit the white bell back in the subscriber area on the homepage of my channel, and it will give you a drop-down menu and some choices. So say that you want to be notified of my videos. But I'm generally putting them out Saturdays. 11 a.m. Pacific time, unless things get too busy for me, and then I'll leave a note in the community saying I just can't get a video out. Thank you all for being here. If you haven't subscribed, I hope you do. And I'll be talking about family scapegoating, abuse, and disenfranchised grief next week. So I hope to see you then.